Hello, Melissa Prycer here, and I am the Executive Director here at Dallas Heritage Village, and I'm here today for a bit of history, but there's also a little confession in here as well. So, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine, Delia Campbell, who used to work at the Dallas Historical Society, asked me to prepare a talk on the women's suffrage movement here in Dallas, knowing that that was something I've always been interested in and have done some work on in the past. And so I said, sure. And then I started working on it, and I was very surprised to see a name that I was really familiar with, and that name was Barry Miller. And here's where the confession is. I have worked at Dallas Heritage Village for 15 years. I knew Barry Miller was a politician, and I knew that he was the second owner, second person to live here in Millermore, and I had never thought about what he had actually done as a politician. And so that's where the confession is. And so he was involved in the suffrage movement. So let me set the stage and kind of tell that story to you, as well as confess my ignorance about a person who is really important both locally and here in the stories that we tell at Dallas Heritage Village. So 1918, I know suffrage happened in 1920, but 1918 is where we're really going to get going here. There's a lot going on, a lot of that because of World War I. So women's clubs that have been quietly running things behind the scenes here in Dallas for years were really, really busy doing war work. At the same time, the women's suffrage movement was using the war as a real opportunity to show the world that women deserve the vote, need the vote, all of that good stuff. Here in Texas, there was also a really unique opportunity. In 1917, our governor, Jim Ferguson, had been impeached. And he was very, very, very vocally against suffrage. So he had said publicly many times that if any bill crossed his desk of any kind relating to women's suffrage, he would veto it. So when he was impeached, the new guy, W.P. Hobby, came in and he was very pro-suffrage. And so the women saw this as an opportunity. The other opportunity was, of course, people were really upset about the amount of corruption that had been uncovered during the impeachment trial. In 1917, Minnie Fisher Cunningham, who was kind of running things in Texas for the Equal Suffrage Association, wrote to Carrie Chapman Catt, who is the leader of the national suffrage movement, quote, "It has been full 6 weeks since I have found any man with the temerity to look us in the eye and say he opposed women's suffrage in the face of the outrageous condition that has been proven to prevail in our state government." So what they started working towards was a March 1918 special session that they knew was going to be called. And there was no legislation proposed, but they were thinking maybe they could get a primary suffrage bill passed. And what that would do would be enable women to vote in primaries, but not general elections or federal elections. Texas was essentially a one-party state, so it was seen as almost as good as having the full vote, and they thought that was something they could get passed. So various suffrage associations throughout the state started advocacy work to try and convince state legislators to vote in favor of that. They used some modern technology, including sending a telegram every 15 minutes to state senators, which I love. It's like an email campaign, only different. Here in Dallas, Barry Miller, who at this point has been elected to the House of Representatives, he had been in politics since the late 1890s. In fact, during his first run as a Texas state senator, he had actually written the legislation that made the bluebonnet the state flower of Texas, which I think is pretty cool too. His wife, Minnie Miller, was very active in all of those women's clubs that were doing all that work, but she was not interested in suffrage at all. Her daughter actually wrote in a memoir about the family. Mama had not, and not is in all caps of course, wanted the vote, but when she got it, she took it very seriously. So the Dallas Equal Suffrage Association was currently, at that time, raising money for World War I, and Barry Miller made a contribution. And so they saw that as an opening and went to Barry and said, would you be willing to support any kind of suffrage legislation that might come up at the March 1918 special session? So what Barry said was, I'm really not sure that Dallas women want the right to vote, but if you can get me a petition with 5,000 names on it, I will change my mind. And so these women got to work. this is where things get fun. So Nona B. Mahoney was the vice president of the Dallas Equal Suffrage Association, and she was in a lot of newspapers as they were talking about the different, campaigns and the growing numbers. She said to the Dallas Morning News, "These signatures are necessary in order to persuade one man, Barry Miller, that there is a silent sentiment in favor of suffrage in Dallas County. We are going to win. There is no chance for us to fail." So these club women started canvassing, of course, their immediate circles to get their signatures, but they also made a special effort to reach out to working women, going to various workplaces such as, and some of these are names you may be familiar with locally, Sanger Brothers, Neiman Marcus, Butler Brothers, the Brown Cracker and Candy Company, and the offices that were located in the Wilson Building. In a March 9th article announcing that they expected to go over the 5,000 mark that day, this is happening in about a week, Mrs. Mahoney stated, "The interest in this petition is not confined to any one class. The women of Highland Park and the Mill Districts are equally interested and equally anxious to sign." There are a lot of fun anecdotes in that article, including mention of his mother who had 5 daughters working in the factories who believed that their working conditions would improve if they had to vote. There was another woman who was 70 years old who brought in a petition with over 200 signatures, and then she apologized. Quote, "I would have got a good many more, but I happened upon so many old friends that I just had to stop and chat with them for a while." So in mid-March, Nona Mahoney took the 10,000 signatures that they had gathered to Barry Miller's office, and just a few days later, the House voted 84 to 34 to give women the right to vote in the primary election, and Barry voted in favor. There was a lot of back and forth, as there often is in politics, but by the end of the month, Texas women had the right to vote in the primary. Of course, that wasn't the end of the suffrage story, and you may say, well, yeah, he's changed his vote for this one thing, but did he really change his mind? And I think maybe the answer to that is yes, because as work began to get the federal amendment passed in 1919, Barry Miller was there again. The Dallas Equal Suffrage Association launched a men's campaign in support of the federal amendment, and Barry Miller was the head of the men's campaign. He spoke and gave speeches all across North Texas in favor of women's suffrage. So Texas was the 9th state to ratify the 19th Amendment, and it was the first southern state to do so. And I think a lot of that was because of all the groundwork that had been done a couple of years ago with the primary bill. Barry was very active in all of this, and he said in a June 1919 article, "I do not expect any great opposition to the ratification of the suffrage amendment." So, I love this story for a lot of reasons, but I think one of them is that it is a great case of a politician who changes his mind due to the will of the people. And no matter what side of the political aisle we might be on, that's something that I think can give us a little bit of hope, because our voice does matter and our votes do matter. So thank you for joining me on this little exploration into Barry's story. There's a lot more fun stuff about Barry Miller and, of course, the suffrage movement here in Texas, and we can't wait to continue sharing those stories with you. Thanks.